Hello, welcome for joining us here at Culinary Camp. You're in the virtual kitchen. I am your chef, Mr. Ronnie, and now you're cooking. So let's take a look at some meat quality and cooking methods. Our objectives is to learn some meat marketing considerations, a little bit about eating satisfaction and palatability or how well it tastes. And let's talk about mix, or consumers often mix safety and lean quality. Grading versus inspection. Grading is a marketing tool, while inspection is mandatory. Inspection assumes products' wholesomeness, safety, and labeling. So everywhere that you buy meat will be inspected by USDA. Grading is completely voluntary. It's paid for by the packer and administered by the USDA. So where you buy your meat from may have a grading. For red meat, you can see it called prime, choice, and standard. When we talk about meat quality, and this is true for beef, pork, and poultry, is color, texture, and firmness. Color is not always the best indication, but it can be used. I'm not telling you to go out and eat green meat, but color is not the only way we tell. The maturity affects color, from darker, from young to old. And packaging. We have 3 different methods of packing meat. We have tray and overwrap, vacuum, and this system called MAP. So meat quality has something to do with eating satisfaction. We want to think about tenderness, flavor, and juiciness. And that leads to a consistency of eating experience. Who wants to go out to a nice restaurant and order a meal that you did not enjoy? It was too dry, overcooked, etc. Maturity can affect eating satisfaction. In red meat, they're usually between 9 to 30 months old. And look at the difference in this graph. If you take a cattle to market between 9 and 38 months of age, you have only a 1 in 8 chance of an undesirable eating experience. But if you wait till that animal gets a little older, let's say 30 to 42 months, you have a lot more chance of running into an undesirable eating experience. More desirable tenderness is what you get with less or younger animals. We also pay very close attention to marbling. Marbling is that intramuscular fat within the muscle. As you can see those white specks inside the red, that is within the muscle. That is what we look at as far as marbling. We're not looking at the outside layer of fat. We have a ribeye steak we're looking at. We are interested in those white specks called marbling. So that's what they use to give it a grade, and it also contributes to the taste. The degrees of marbling, as seen here, go from moderately all the way to slight. So when we're grading, we would want marbly abundant on the higher scale. But most you'll see is choice, and that's probably going to be somewhere in the slightly abundant to moderate, maybe even modest. Some of our beef and meat's aged. So what does that mean, aged? Aging is the time from the harvest till cut into retail cuts. That's what you're going to buy in the store. Aging has a tenderization effect. Aging time usually takes 7 to 14 days and can enhance a beefy flavor into red meat. But it also reduces yield due to dehydration. And one must be careful when dry aging beef because it can develop off odors and usually takes up too much space in the freezer. What's commonly seen in the grocery stores and where you will buy your meat is wet aging. It'll be in vacuum bags under refrigeration, and it does increase tenderness and has more of a traditional flavor, and you don't lose as much to evaporation, which makes it less expensive than dry aged. Have you ever seen dry aged beef? If you see it for sale, give it a try. It has a distinctive brown roast beef flavor. Why are meats packaged differently? When you go to the store, you'll see many different meats packaged many different ways. Simply, we want to prevent dehydration from packaging or freezer burn. We want to protect the meat. And really, you will see only 3 options in your grocery store. You will see paper freezer wrap, tray over wrap, and vacuum. That last one, the modified atmosphere packaging system, is really for chain stores, big box stores. Very expensive way to package meat. But we'll focus on paper freezer wrap, tray over wrap, and vacuum sealed. The paper freezer wrap does not exclude all air. If you can wrap it nice and pretty, it does really well like that. My grandmother, she lived to be 89 years old. She was very good at it. She could wrap up a package of meat. It looked like a Christmas present. However, when I do it, it looks more like a Tootsie Roll. If your package looks like a Tootsie Roll, you will not be able to keep freezer burn out of it. One very common method is the tray overwrap method. It is a foam tray with a permeable film over it. It allows fresh color. That's what you will buy if you buy a steak or a pork chop from a butcher, a service counter. They will give you a tray overwrapped. And that's really not meant for freezer storage. It's only good for 2 to 3 days in that package system. What's really good for packaged meat is vacuum packaging. You can buy vacuum sealers now reasonably priced for longer storage times up to a 3-week period. It gives it a darker color, less oxidation, which means keeps oxygen out, maintains flavor longer. It's fresh or frozen product, but you must watch out for potential leakers. Got to be careful that it doesn't leak. And finally, that map system, if you are at a store and you see a bubble-looking appearance package, that is that modified atmosphere packaging. So how long should I store my beef? And this is really for any meat. Fresh steaks and roasts, 9 to 12 months. Ground beef or ground products, only 3 to 4 months. And the colder the better. Keep freezer at least 0 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Longer storage is generally a meat quality problem rather than meat safety. But these are general guidelines to use as far as storage goes. So how do you cook a beef steak? I've heard people say I do not eat steak because it's always tough, or my roasts are usually dry. Well, the effect of cookery on muscle structure results in both toughening and tenderization. So collagen solubilization, which is a fancy way of breaking down fibers, causes tenderness. But coagulation of proteins is a fancy way of how it can toughen the meats. For tender cuts, low connective tissue, remember we went over some common cuts of beef that can be cooked on short times and higher temperatures. It prevents that protein hardening. If you have less tender cuts, that's why it's very important to know what you're cooking with. You have to cook longer and more slow. You have to soften the collagen. Higher cooking temperatures causes greater dehydration and results in drier meat. Greater internal doneness results in less juicy meat. Losses due to evaporation and drip loss. There's only two general types of cookery. You have dry heat for those tender cuts, and you have moist heat methods for those that have higher connective tissues and not so tender cuts. Let's talk about degrees of doneness. This is a personal preference, but approximate temperature for rare is around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Medium up to 150 to 160, and well done is 170. On the right, you can see the color kinds of changes, but as mentioned before, color is not always the best indicator. It is always best to use a good meat thermometer to check the internal temperature. Now, it is true, they'll say, well, how come I can eat a steak medium rare for 145 degrees internal temperature, but I shouldn't do that with a hamburger meat? Please do not eat your hamburger meat at 145 degrees. Hamburgers must be cooked at 160 degrees. Chicken needs to be cooked at 160 degrees also. But the reason why you cannot do that with ground meat, whereas a steak you can cook at 145, is because all that bacteria and germs on the outside of the meat that's touched air gets mixed up into the whole product with ground meat. You're grinding it, you're tearing those proteins down, you are mushing it all together. So that's why we must cook it thoroughly all the way through. So how long will the meat keep? Remember, longer storage is generally a meat quality problem rather than meat safety. So let's talk about nutrition. What are beef's good and bad qualities? Most food have good nutritional value, but most are lacking in some nutrients. Beef is nutrient rich, good to excellent source of 10 essential nutrients while providing low calories. It has B vitamins, minerals, iron, zinc, phosphorus, and approximately half of the fats are unsaturated. And 1/3 of beef saturated fat is stearic acid, which has neutral effect on blood cholesterol. Over 29 cuts of meat meet the government guidelines for lean quality. Here you can see a 3-ounce serving of lean beef is only 104 calories and contributes less than 10% of calories to a 2,000 calorie diet. Yet it supplies more than 10% of the daily value. A 3-ounce serving has 10 essential nutrients. Thank you for viewing this presentation. Now, hopefully you'll be able to try grilling some meat and have some fun in the kitchen. Of course, seek your parents' help or your guardian's help and continue on with your progress here at Culinary Art Camp.